This is going to be short, but the memory sprung into mind a couple days back and I thought it would be worth sharing. I live in North Wales. For anyone who has had the pleasure of visiting, it is truly a beautiful place to live, though for an adolescent boy, it is certainly lacking in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of the countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated, in comparison to the closest cities, there is a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside this road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby which we believed to be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be needed in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily as the train track was right beside us. Not in close enough to be any danger, but definitely a sufficiently small distance to cause panic for any train driver. And panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we had removed the heavy steel disc and started descending the ladder down into the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress into the other side. At this point, we are totally confined to the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you are confused as what the hell this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would have never known there was even an inside had we not found the manhole. So, as we squeeze and crouch, at one point scraping along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there's a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from end to end is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point, you could look down through narrow gaps onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped keep us calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were still just a group of guys on an adventure, and this was about to change dramatically. No more than a few meters beyond halfway, one of us claimed they could see an object in the distance at the far end. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I have never felt the sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or a magazine, showing a fully naked lady in an erotic position. The reason I don't just refer to it as porn is because something was different about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister than sexy, if that makes any sense. More disturbingly, the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page. Removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had us rendered completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom, the horrendous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the fuck out of there as humanly possible, smashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder. Of course, we were all praying to God that the manhole cover hadn't been resealed, as it was impossible to tell until you reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed as far as our legs could carry us. I'm sure this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you reading this, as we, luckily, never bumped into the twisted individual who sits in that chair, but I must stress how radically out of the norm this was given where I live. The reason I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose. There is easily enough people here to escape the realms of crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have someone clearly lose grip on society without somebody taking notice. For example, there was literally only one homeless man who everyone knew in the area and were actually pretty fond of, eventually resulting in a mass gathering at his funeral when he passed away. Sometimes I think, though not recently, as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down into that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and do God knows what that ends up with a condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't envision a more surreal situation. It has just come to my realization that what we unearthed that night has not been uttered to another soul. As a naive teenager, it was the type of thing you just want to forget. But thinking about it, we probably should have let the police, or at least someone, know about what was down there, because it wasn't the doings of a healthy-minded individual. So there you have it. Apologies for the length. I got a little carried away as it was my first Let's Not Meet post. I wanted to make the reading experience as similar to as reality as I could. Now I'm a few years older and hopefully a bit braver. I'm considering going down there again, accompanied of course, to see what fucked up shit might be waiting. This could well happen in the next couple of days, and rest assured I will 100% post an update as I currently have no job, so time is plentiful. Thanks for reading. As promised, here are the photos from the return visit. We went early evening, so there was still plenty of light. As a result, I have decided to use a simple filter on most of the outdoor shots, simply just to reduce the light, and give it the eeriness it deserves. Unfortunately, I hadn't adequately conveyed my plans to those accompanying me, and they had just presumed I wanted to check out the small area before the entrance to the passageways, as they had not been there before. When I expressed my wishes to navigate through the bridge, they instantly noped the fuck out of there, as you can imagine, and I was massively disappointed. I hope to go back soon with a bunch of different guys, but I can't promise when. Here are the pictures taken from last night's return to the bridge. This will be the last time I venture down there. Thanks for reading. I hope you enjoy. We went to an abandoned hospital. There was a large square staircase spiraling up to the roof outside of the building. Locked steel door at the bottom, so the only way was to climb up on the outside to the first landing. My buddy boosts me up. I climb over, and there's a sleeping bag with a steak knife right next to it on the landing. I call down, we're definitely not alone here, dude. No, but it's cool, says a voice behind me, but scaring the shit out of me and causing me to jump and whirl around. There's a young, dirty, homeless-looking guy standing there, coming down the stairs from above, hams up, palms out. I didn't mean to scare you. He takes a seat on the stairs, so I carefully step on the handle of the steak knife, lean over the edge, and pull my friend up. We had planned to sit on the roof and drink a beer, so we offered the homeless guy one, which he gratefully accepts, and we shoot the shit on the landing for a while. We're talking about the city, the cops, traveling, life in general. He's basically a drifter, been in town for a week or so, but he's a nice guy. Things are going pretty well, and then he asks, "You guys are human, right?" I fucking hate it when I meet people that end up being aliens, and you never know until you peel their skin off. They've been after me a long time, you know. They don't stop. They never stop. Sometimes I think I should just kill everyone to be safe. He's definitely not joking, and there's an uncomfortable silence as my friend and I realize, this guy's fucking crazy. "Yeah, man," I say, "we're human. We just wanted to check out the place and drink some beer. We're gonna go ahead and move on now. We definitely don't want any trouble." He just stares in silence, so we leave him the last beer. We carefully jump back up the railing, down and walk away very quickly, constantly looking back over our shoulders. The entire time he's just standing there, still and silent, watching us leave. 5 years later, that place is still abandoned, and we've never been back. I'm not a believer in the supernatural, but humans can be deceptive and dangerous in ways you can never see coming. This happened 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. My Urbex friends and I were on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area when we discovered a really creepy cave. We did some mild exploring that day, but quickly realized it would require more gear to thoroughly explore. Flashlights, respirators, etc. About a week later, 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered there was basically one mine shaft that sloped downward and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down, which was pretty well graded, so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery, and rusting equipment off of this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning. We were trying not to get lost or confused. Along the way, the walls were littered with classic abandoned graffiti. X was here, swastikas, initials and dates, phallic drawings, etc. As we got deeper and deeper, though, the graffiti really started to thin out. At this point, the light from the entrance was long gone, and we were solely relying on flashlights. The air was so stagnant and hazy with particles that the light from our flimsy flashlights would only go about 20 feet or so, before totally getting obscured by the dust. The glow sticks we had brought to mark our way to prevent us getting lost were also basically useless because they would disappear in the haze, only a few steps after dropping them. At this point, we started arguing amongst ourselves. Several of the crew was nervous about going any deeper with the air quality being so terrible. And without a good way to prevent us from getting lost, we were probably a quarter mile into the earth about now. The rest of us managed to override that sentiment of fear by assuring them that the path was easy and straightforward, so we'd have to try to get lost. We were going to rely on our level-headedness, sense of direction, and flashlight battery life to get out. Despite the argument to push on, it was becoming very creepy for everyone. We walked for a while in silence, hearing nothing but our own movements and the steady drip of water coming from somewhere deep in the cave. I think we were all pretty scared at this point, but no longer willing to admit it to each other. Then we stumbled across something that made all of us stop cold. Dug into the side of the deep stone shaft we were slowly descending was a tunnel, an offshoot. It was narrow, you'd have to crouch to go through it. And it was also a good few feet off the ground, so it required a scramble to reach it. But that wasn't what made us stop. It was the graffiti. We hadn't seen any for about 10 minutes or so, and assumed the artist never came this deep. But someone else clearly had, and the message they left was ominous. The tunnel was lined with words written in white, all of them somehow relating to death and destruction. Scrawled through the tunnel were words like suffering, pain, plague, disease, and hell. It was pretty terrifying. Who else would come this far just to write a terrible message in a mysterious tunnel that broke from the main path? But there was no turning back now. We had to see where the tunnel led. Despite our fear, we were overwhelmed by the intense curiosity. So one by one, we crawled through the tunnel to the other side. What we found was a strange flooded chamber. Around the pool of water were many large stones, each covered with dozens of burnt out tea candles. There must have been hundreds of used tea candles in that place. The walls had a few creepy monster faces poorly graffitied on them, and the tunnel entrance back to the main shaft was ringed with a spray-painted blood-stained mouth. What was this place? Some sort of ritual site for local Satan worshippers? An elaborate hoax set up by a bunch of kids? We couldn't find much evidence to figure it out, and we were running out of adrenaline to keep exploring. We all crawled out of that weird hellhole and back into the main shaft, where we promptly headed back towards the exit. When we finally saw that pinprick of natural light coming from the real world outside, we were flooded with relief. We never did figure out what that mysterious cavern was for. I think I'm content to leave it as a mystery. No, we didn't hear any monsters in the depths of the tunnel, or find any bloody Satan praisers themselves. But just finding that room, buried deep in an old forgotten mine, was enough to creep us all out for a very long time.